$2,900 a month is achievable. It isn't some abstract number or a distant fantasy, it's a realistic target. And for most people, that amount can mean the difference between constant stress and finally having room to breathe. Between simply covering the basics and having real options, better housing, taking care of your health, spending more time with the people you love, or opening your bank account without worrying about what you'll find. But in dividend math, this one target can lead to extremely different paths. At a 3% yield, you'd need roughly $1.16 million. At an 8% yield, the same income drops to about $435,000. And right in the middle sits our magic number, $500,000 at 7%. So yes, generating $2,900 per month in dividends is possible. Let me show you how. My name is DC Roth from the Bureau. Over the last few years, we've helped educate over 3 million people on money and markets here on YouTube. And today, I'm going to walk you through what it takes to generate $2,900 per month in dividends, look at the trade-offs, and explain when a high-yield approach makes sense and when it might not. I'll also share my own strategy at the end. Now, to understand why the answer isn't as simple as choosing the highest yield, imagine two investors, Sarah and Daniel. Sarah has $500,000 invested at an average yield of 7%. Daniel has $870,000 invested at an average yield of 4%. Initially, their results look almost identical. Sarah receives $35,000 per year or just over $2,900 per month. Daniel receives $34,800 per year, which is exactly $2,900 per month. They reach the same destination using two very different portfolios, but Sarah needs $370,000 less capital. Now, obviously, that sounds like a far better deal, right? Well, not so fast. Reaching a 7% yield usually requires her to rely on individual high-yield stocks, particular sectors, or specialized income products. Daniel needs substantially more money, but the lower yield gives him more room to diversify across established companies and broader funds, which usually brings greater stability. Just imagine Sarah's dividends get cut by 20%. All of a sudden, her monthly income falls from roughly $2,900 to around $2,300. That's the trade-off. Less capital means depending more heavily on the yield holding up. So neither Sarah's nor Daniel's approach is automatically better. They're solving the same problem by accepting different trade-offs. But before you can decide which approach makes the most sense for you, you need to understand what a dividend actually is, because there's still a number of misconceptions. And in reality, it's quite simple. A dividend is a cash payment a company chooses to make to its shareholders. Most companies fund these payments from the profits and cash flows generated by the business, but not every company pays a dividend. Some reinvest their money into hiring, research, acquisitions, or simple expansions. Others, especially mature businesses that generate way more cash than they can productively reinvest, return a part of that money to their shareholders. Apple and Alphabet, also known as Google, currently pay dividends, but they're super tiny with yields below 1%. McDonald's sits a bit higher, closer to the mid 2% range. Now, of course, these aren't high-yield stocks, but they illustrate the basic idea. Cash leaves the company and is paid to the people who own its shares. At yields this low, though, you would need an extremely large portfolio if you wanted to live purely off the income. And that leads us straight to the biggest misconception. Dividends are not free money added on top of your investment. They're part of your investment. The ex-dividend date is the cutoff for receiving the next dividend. If you buy the stock on or after that date, the payment goes to the previous owner. Because the dividend reduces the company's value, the share price will typically adjust downward by roughly that same amount. So if a stock trades at $100 and pays a $1 dividend, it will usually fall to around $99, assuming nothing else changes. Meaning, before the payment, you owned a share worth $100, and after the payment, you own a share worth $99 and have $1 in cash. A part of the company's value has simply moved from the share price into your brokerage account. And if you don't reinvest that dollar, you now have slightly less money invested in the company. You haven't sold a single share, but part of your investment is now sitting in cash. That's why dividends should always be evaluated as part of your total return, not as money appearing from nowhere. Now let's get back to our $2,900 goal and calculate exactly what it requires. The basic formula is simple and it works whether you're targeting $2,900, $5,000, or even $10,000 per month. Required capital equals annual dividend income divided by the portfolio dividend yield. So in our case, $2,900 multiplied by 12 equals $34,800 per year. At 3%, that's about $1.16 million. At 4%, that's $870,000. At 5%, $696,000. At 6%, $580,000. And at 7%, That's $497,000, essentially $500K. On paper, this works perfectly, but this is also where 7% stops being a regular number and starts becoming an entire investment strategy. You see, as of mid-July 2026, the broad S&P 500 was yielding only a little over 1%. High dividend equity ETFs were generally offering more, often somewhere in the 4 to 5% range. Realty Income, commonly known as the monthly dividend company, was yielding approximately 5.1%. It has a long history of monthly payments and increases, yet even this well-known income stock remained below the 7% target. So, achieving a consistent 7% without taking on substantially more risk is very difficult and, of course, not guaranteed. If you want to research all the current dividend yields yourself, a good free site is dividendranks.com. You'll find a link to that in the description. But before you start looking, one extremely important detail. Dividend yield is calculated by dividing the annual dividend by the current share price. That means a yield can rise for two very different reasons. The company increases its dividend or the share price falls. Meaning if a company pays an annual dividend of $5 and its shares trade at $100, that gives it a 5% yield. Now imagine the share price falls to $62 while the dividend stays the same. Suddenly the yield appears to be 8%, and on paper, the income looks much more attractive, but nothing about the company's payment has improved. The yield only increased because investors became less willing to own the stock at its previous price. So in other words, a high yield can be a bargain or a distress signal. And until you understand why the yield is high, you don't know which one you're looking at. This is why simply sorting stocks from highest yield to lowest is not a good investment strategy. In fact, that's no investment strategy at all. So when you start researching yields and want to go a little deeper, these are the risks you need to pay attention to. First, dividend cut risk. The payment can be reduced or eliminated if the company's profits or cash flow weaken. That doesn't just reduce your income, the share price may also fall as investors react to the cut. Second, concentration risk. Many high-yield investments cluster in the same sector, so a portfolio may look diversified by name while still depending on the same economic conditions. Third, capital loss risk. A company can continue paying income while the underlying investment loses substantial value. And fourth, inflation risk. If your dividend income stays fixed at $2,900 while living costs rise 3% per year, that money loses roughly a quarter of its purchasing power over 10 years. So the goal isn't simply to find a portfolio that pays $2,900 today. The goal is to find a portfolio that can generate the purchasing power of $2,900 in today's terms years from now. You need to think about whether that income can survive, whether it can grow, and whether the portfolio supporting it can remain healthy over time. But honestly, this is the exciting part, getting into that deep research mode, refining things over time. I love it. Now, before I show you what I'm personally doing, there's one final cost we need to consider: taxes. For US investors, qualified dividends in a regular brokerage account are generally taxed at the lower long-term capital gains rates, while non-qualified dividends are taxed as ordinary income. Holding investments inside an IRA, 401k, or Roth account can change the treatment significantly. And for my European friends and investors, there is no single system for us. Every country sets its own rates and rules, and cross-border dividends can also face withholding tax. So if you need $2,900 per month after tax, $34,800 in annual dividends may not be enough. At a rate of 20%, you would need $43,500 in gross dividends. At a 7% yield, that increases the required portfolio from roughly $500,000 to over $620,000. Taxes matter a lot during the building phase. If part of every dividend is taxed before you reinvest it, less money remains available to compound. This is where accumulating and distributing funds differ. They are usually marked as ACC and DIST in your brokerage platform. A distributing fund pays the income out to you, an accumulating fund reinvests it automatically. Now, I've had to learn this the hard way. Accumulating does not necessarily mean tax-free. The exact rules obviously depend on where you live, what you own, and which account you use. Just keep that in mind. The important bit is simple. The dividend shown on your screen and the money you actually keep can be two very different numbers. And this brings us to my own strategy. Now, of course, I'm building toward a portfolio that can eventually support my wife and kids financially, even if I'm not around anymore. But right now, I'm not using high-yield dividend stocks to get there. The reason for this is simple: time. I still have around 30 years before I expect to meet this income. So my priority today is maximizing how much cash my portfolio pays me. My priority is giving my money as much time as possible to grow and compound. In other words, In my current stage, an extra $2,900 per month would be reinvested anyway. The majority of my portfolio is actually built around the FTSE All-World. That's my foundation. If you're not familiar with that, it provides broad exposure to companies across developed and emerging markets rather than only focusing on US markets. The remaining portion is spread across individual companies, small caps, and a few themes I believe have long-term potential. Stuff like energy, robotics, and gene editing. And yes, of course, there's some crypto in there as well, mainly Bitcoin. But those positions sit around the core, so I'm not making my financial future depend on one company, one sector, or one high-yield investment. That's probably going to be different by the time I turn 60, and this doesn't mean my approach is better. It simply fits the biggest advantage I currently have, which is a long time horizon. Later, when dependable income becomes much more important, I'll gradually shift my portfolio toward an income-focused strategy because, quite honestly, I don't know what kind of public retirement support my generation will have by then. So the main question you need to ask yourself is this: do you need income from your portfolio today, or do you need the portfolio to become as large as possible for later? That's the big question. For someone already in retirement, a reliable dividend stream is an extremely attractive option. It provides regular cash flow and feels much more comfortable than repeatedly selling shares. But for someone like myself, with hopefully decades before retirement, the answer can look very different. So yes, $500,000 at 7% will generate $2,900 per month. But the math works, and this strategy fits my life, are two very different conclusions. The right approach depends on your risk appetite and whether you're still focusing on building wealth or ready to start living off it. Now, if you want to see a complete comparison between growth-focused and income-focused investing and how your time horizon can completely change the outcome, make sure to subscribe because that will be my next video. And please let me know in the comments if you're currently building for growth, investing for income, or trying to find the right balance between both. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.